it's amazing when you go in the field and you look at your flock. You think, it's all great and good, until you get them in that pen and you put your hand down their back and you realise, that, there's a couple of them that need attention, maybe, in the month of August, that they need, that bit extra grass or maybe even a bit of feed just if you want to keep them on. So, it's good to get in there, put your hand on their back, make decisions fairly early on if you can to try and, get ahead of the problems, I suppose,
Hello, I'm Kieran Lynch and welcome to OviCast, the Teagasc Sheep podcast. Each episode will bring you the latest insights, advice and technical updates for the sheep industry. Now in this week's episode, we head west to Corrandulla, County Galway to hear from sheep and beef farmer Michael Forde, who is a participant in the Better Farm programme. We chat about the impact of a difficult 2023 on lamb performance and sales. We also discussed the impact it had in yoke condition and how he's managed the flock this winter. We discussed the steps he's taken to address yoke condition since housing, this year's scanning results and his feeding plans for ewes in late pregnancy. We start off with Michael discussing his farming system and some of the challenges of managing a fragmented farm.
Running here in Corrandulla, around 27 hectares, mainly sheep, around 180 ewes and about 18 cattle.
Michael, a very typical farm in the west of Ireland. Just maybe to give us a little bit of context, we'll get into the different systems. Your farm, I know from being on it with you before, it is fragmented. You might just tell me how many blocks you're running on.
Well, probably running on 3 blocks, Kieran. Yeah. So the main area here around the farm, we've probably 17 acres up, maybe about 3-4 miles away in Corrandulla, and there's another 13 acres in Ballinduff, which is another 3 miles the other way. So creates its own challenges in parts of the year when you're trying to moving stock around from different grass and silage. A lot of sometimes silage will be away from the farm, so there's a lot of to and fro to bring stuff back to the yard.
You have a lot of road work, and I suppose you touched on there, it does throw up its own challenges, and probably one of them, I know you discussed this with me before, one of them is the home farm is probably the wettest farm, where you have the sheds and where you have the housing. So in springtime you really are ferrying lambs, cattle, everything kind of moves away from there.
Yeah, well, I suppose that was, back a couple of years ago, we used to always, close up these blocks around the farm here, because we'd have it for when lambing time would come around, places to go out and where it's close by to the yard. But, a couple of years, we got caught with bad winters, and we ended up having to bring lambs and sheep back into the sheds because, they just had no shelter and the land was too wet. So while it was a bit more difficult, I suppose, I was closing up the land that was further away from the farm, because it was just better to have it at that time of year where the sheep could go and have shelter, and especially with the lambs,
Yeah, look, I suppose most times we talk about closing up around the shed, but in your particular case, it's not as big an advantage as some of the out farms are more suitable.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's probably going back 2 seasons ago now. We just got an awful bad February and March. I remember just lots and lots of rain, and you'd go out in the morning and they'd be all, tucked in under the wall. But the land is too wet around here, and I lose too many fields once the weather is very, very bad. So, like the last couple of years now, I've closed up all of Corrandulla, so that gives me a good block. I've closed up all of Ballinduff at this stage, so that gives me 2 good blocks. Later out, maybe in April, end of April, when I want to start moving stuff out.
Look, so you basically stock each of them blocks then according to what they can carry for the year.
Yeah, well, that's the main aim, and we put it in. There's one field in Corrandulla which I suppose there's 15 acres in it, and the other field has about 2 acres. So I put the 15 acres into about 4 blocks, and I rotate around on a grazing thing for the sheep after that. And
then you can, depending on bale sale, you're supposed to drop out the surpluses. But we might just get into the different systems. So the cattle system on the farm, what are you running there?
So we bring in, I bought in 9 heifers and 9 bullocks this year. I bought them in they were all bought in May, around maybe 400 kilos weight stores. Put them in, they're getting about maybe 2 kilos a meal now a day just to keep them going. And I'll probably drop that off now in the next couple of weeks, and I'll probably get them in. I'll finish them out in grass, and I'll bring them up around 27, 28 months, and we'll kill them off of that.
Okay, so you're getting 2 grazing seasons out of
Yeah,
most of your sheep.
I think it just works for me. Like, I mean, the heifers probably won't reach now. There'll be a couple of heifers. I think they'll be finished coming out of the shed. But the bullocks, there's fairly good quality bullocks in it. Like, they can take a bit of weight. So rather than buying in, newer new stock again, and I'll keep running these for a couple of months.
Okay, so they're kind of split between the different grazing blocks.
Exactly. Yeah.
And the sheep system, you touched on it briefly there. You might just tell me the type of ewe flock you're running, what kind of breeds and that you've in it.
So it's a Suffolk ewes. I crossed with Texel rams. Now I keep a Charlie ram as well, and I always have over the last couple of years. I always any hoggers that are brought in, I always give them the Charlie ram. I suppose it's just a thing that I do, that when it's their first time, maybe not to have. He's a fairly easy lamb, so that's what I've ran in the last couple of years.
Okay, and then look, you're selling all out of that flock.
Yeah, at the moment, yeah, everything is sold out. So, this year now, a lot of lambs went to Hetford Mart, and anything out goes to the factory will go to Down Ballyhonnet.
Look, we might just keep going on the lambs when we're talking about them. Look, like most, Michael, a challenging year for finishing lambs. You probably changed the system around a wee bit and pushed your ewe numbers up. I know from chatting before, like you've tried to finish off more, maybe cut down some of the inputs in them.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously working with yourselves through Teagasc, try to cut down probably on meal a little bit, and work a bit more with grass, and trying to make sure the lambs are in front of quality grass all the time. I suppose the challenge was that the year was a challenge, that the wet year didn't help, I suppose, and maybe lamb performance wasn't as good as I would have liked, this year. But a lot of that is down to the weather, I think. I mean, the lambs always had the best of grass in front of them all the time. But it was a challenge this year for lamb performance for sure.
Yeah. Definitely a difficult back end, and I know, like from talking before too, like you're pushing them the full weight all the time. You were still killing a batch there as we came into the back end of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so I suppose I sold a batch off there just before. We said they shut down for Christmas. I think 17 or 18 lambs went to that stage, and then I kind of left them. I let them go for another few weeks, and I sold 17 more there again. So they averaged out around the 22.7 kilos. They're paying up to 23, so they averaged out around the 155. So happy enough at this stage of the year to be getting that kind of money for them. After.
Yeah, look, it has been a challenge. I suppose you touched on that. Like, I suppose this year was one of the years where they probably let you down a little bit every time we put them on the scales. It was just a challenging back end as well. I suppose you can experience that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I suppose I think I was doing the right thing in terms of how I'm trying to run it. I think obviously again working through with yourselves and Teagasc, over the last year, definitely producing a lot more grass. I think a lot more better grass, and they were always being rotated and going into the best grass, especially after when I cut silage. I cut silage in early June, so I had lots of paddocks with aftergrass, and they were always getting good. But again, I suppose just again the challenging year, very wet, and as we all know, lambs don't like the wet.
No, like ourselves, it's not always best for thriving, so it's not.
Absolutely, yeah.
And look, it's something I've discussed with one before, like feeding groups, stuff like that. It's a system that's going to be tweaked over the coming years.
Yeah, so look, I suppose for me this year, looking at last year, I suppose it's been a kind of a wake up call really, in terms of the way the weather can affect. And I'll be looking at obviously grouping again this year coming in, but maybe being a bit more focused to get them finished that bit quicker. I think, for me in my system, I really don't want to be carrying too many lambs past the month of September again. I think with the way the year has gone, I lose a lot of ground if the weather gets very, very bad, and I'd rather keep maybe the ewes out that bit longer, a week or two more, longer if I could, rather than trying to focus on in October, November, trying to hold grass for lambs. I'd rather have them gone, I think, at this stage. So a bit more focus, I think, this year with the groups and maybe with the feeding as well,
Okay, I suppose like to put that in context, the system you're in, the fact there's 3 fragmented blocks, you really do have to plan out your back end a bit more maybe than somebody with all the ground around them.
Absolutely, and I mean, it's been in the head now for a lot of months the way it worked out this year. So definitely going to have obviously keep going. I think I really believe in that. If I go back even 4 or 5 years ago from where I am now, I think the grass management is just poles apart. So I think it's the right way of doing it and work more with better grass. But I think just getting in there maybe a little bit quicker with a bit of meal, keep them moving all the time. Probably a bit more checking on them. Probably a bit too much focus, I think, at times on the heavier lambs and not keeping an eye on the back end where you're forgetting about the lads that are coming off the back.
Yep. And so look at the end of the day, your focus kind of switching maybe a bit more to that system was to keep costs in check, but there's still input needed at times here, and I think you touched on it there. It's maybe just checking where the lambs are at a certain time of year and knowing when to go in.
I think so, Kieran. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think maybe just probably left a few lambs, trying again, focusing again on the finishing groups and not watching the back, and probably needs to come in there a little bit quicker with the meal, considering the way the year was. So. Yeah. I mean,
look, we're talking about the way the year was. Look, it's not only lambs that had an effect on. I think most this year it did have an effect on ewes, particularly ewe condition. How did you fare out? I know what conditions going with you. How did you fare out going into this back end relative to other years? And we might just talk a bit about the ewes. What happened with them?
I suppose again, going back again on the year, I suppose I felt that maybe the flock wasn't where it needed to be in coming into the back end of the year. Had to house them a little bit earlier this year because of the weather, so they ended up getting housed probably in late November. At that stage, I fast scored them as they were coming in, and I made a kind of pin of any ewes that I thought that just needed that bit more care, and I started to give them actually a bit of silage I was keeping for later on out in February and March when coming close to lambing and at lambing time, just to give them a bit of a push on. And probably maybe 3 weeks ago, I started actually giving them a bit of meal, about 300 grams of concentrate as well, just to keep them pushing on. But I
might just tease you out a bit now, look, like most have said, you probably went into tipping this year, maybe not as good an average, maybe a bit higher cohort ewes, a bit, You were saying that you fed them on the better silage. What kind of quality are we talking here?
So, the size that I kept out, I was keeping, Kieran, was I got tested and it worked out around 73% DMD. So
good silage, and you were hoping you were trying to get a bit of weight back on them early on. Then
I mean, and even though I was had that kind of earmarked for later on in the year, I said, look at when I bothered to fast score them, I may as well kind of give it to them and to be only a few bales used as well. So we did the scanning as well, and we'll go through them now again, and I'll match up anything I feel that needs to be a bit more, put maybe some of the 2s with the 3 or the 1s with the 2s in terms of feeding, just to keep them on the right side,
No, I think it's an important point, Michael. You better deal with it then and realise when you get to the lambing pen and start dealing with problems at that stage. So
yeah, absolutely.
You took them necessary steps. Look, you touched on scanning there. How did the scan go for you this year?
So I think at the initial litter size was just over the 1.8, and I think after the few empties were taken out, it was around 1.75. So it's kind of, I suppose, fairly similar year to the last couple of years as well, so not too bad. I mean, again, going back again on the year, being a little bit worried even before scanning with the way they were and the condition they were, hoping that it wouldn't be the scan wouldn't be too bad. So I was pleased enough with the way things were,
Yeah, look, in fairness, only a handful of empties in it, I suppose, and you've gone up a bit in numbers to 185. So, it has to be said, a good enough overall scan for you, and I suppose something we can working on for the coming years.
Yeah. Look, I mean, was happy enough, and I mean, there's not too many triplets in it, and not too many singles. So it's fairly good overall with couples, like, So look, happy enough with the way they were after the year,
Yeah. So look, you touched on there. You're starting off. You're lambing early March. I should have probably asked you that earlier on, but you're the first week of March, Michael, lambing.
First week of March, yeah. So I'll be kicking off, and yeah. So hopefully, last year went fairly well. So I'm hoping for much the same again,
And so for feeding by you, the triplets and those thinner ewes, you were saying they're already on a small bit of supplementation. Probably look,
Yeah,
that's important to get that in that wee bit earlier with them. You'll be starting the rest now, will you?
yeah. I'll be starting the rest now, and probably once I get them sorted out, they're all like, I suppose a third of them at this stage now are getting meal. At some stage, just to give them a small bit, just to keep them tipping away. And I'll once I've them pinned up, they'll all be getting this.
And look, when you talk about pinning up, you have a nice shed for working. I know you've kitted out a lot of it. You have a well divided out for them as it stands, and you're indoor lambing with them. Like, you've all basically in one shed, or more or less beside other.
Yeah, or more or less, yeah. And there was a new shed put up. Originally I had only four pins in it. So I kind of made it 4 pins for about 30 ewes in each pin, but kind of changed it around. I had kind of a one corner left in it, and I ended up pinning that out as well. So there's about 150 sheep in that in that shed now. Like, it's a nice shed for us, good in area as well. Like, so it works well. Like, and it's built in around the other sheds. So I mean, for lambing time, it's quite good for you're not even when you're going from one shed to the other, you're not really going outside as such.
No, look, especially when you think about anything in part-time work as well. Anything like that you can leave easier is always a big advantage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I am working full time as well, so that presents its own challenge. But I've taken a few weeks off, in the first week in March. So
that's great. It's a good holiday to keep fit. So it is nothing else, Michael.
I don't know if it's a holiday, but anyway.
Very good. Look, you've had a busy year. You've had a lot going on, and I suppose if you take a couple of key points away, you're just chatting to me, like, you've dealt with a lot of the issues you have on the farm. You've actively addressed those condition issues. I suppose there's a good message in that for a lot of farmers.
It's something that I, probably even could be better on. To get in there maybe quicker during the year, just to see, because it's amazing when you go in the field and you look at your flock, you think it's all great and good, like, until you get them in that pen and you put your hand down their back and you realise, that there's a couple of them that need attention, maybe, in the month of August, that they need, that bit extra grass, or maybe even a bit of feed, just if you want to keep them on, like. So, absolutely, I think it's good to get in there, put your hand on their back, make decisions fairly early on if you can, to try and get ahead of the problems, I suppose.
Look, Michael, I really appreciate you coming on. It's good hearing about your system. I'm warning you now, I'll probably have to call on you again at some point to come back on with us. But look, really appreciate you coming on for this episode.
All right, Kieran, thank you very much.
We'll leave it there for this week's episode. I'd like to thank Michael again for coming on with us and going through his farming system and how he's managing his flock this winter. You can find out more about the Better Farm programme and Michael's performance on the Teagasc webpage on the Better Farm section and in the Teagasc Sheep newsletter that comes out each month. That's it for me for this episode. For updates on the sheep programme, keep an eye on our Twitter page at Teagasc Sheep. I'm Kieran Lynch. Thanks for joining us. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us for more episodes.